Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Today, we're going to talk about innovation in GovTech, and we're going to look how local and state governments can transform and embrace new technology and be leaders in innovation. We are joined by a city councilman from Fairfield, California, but his background is unique. He is a technology executive and player in that market. He comes here with two perspectives from both technology and embracing innovation and as a city councilman and local elected official. Today, we are joined by Manveer Sandhu with the city of Fairfield. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. It's great to be here and it's great to see you again.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, particularly go into your technology background.
Yeah, happy to cover that and maybe just share a little bit about how I got here and how we're talking today. As you mentioned, I'm on council right now. I have the pleasure of being elected to the Fairfield City Council. Fun fact, it's actually the second time I'd run for the seat. The first time I ran was in 2018 for that election. I lost my first election for that, but I got really good advice, which was never run only once, run twice, because you build all this traction and progress that if you just don't run a second time, it all goes to waste. And that advice meant a lot to me. And then I actually did end up running a second time, but it was actually for the school board I went to school at, for the school district. And I had the pleasure of winning the election to serve on that school board for 4 years from 2020 to 2024, which meant a lot to me because I graduated from that district, started in kindergarten there, went through high school. And then my sister graduated from that same place as well. That was a really special time. And then following that, I had the opportunity to run for city council a second time to represent the district I've grown up in since I was 6 years old. That's kind of on the political side, but for folks on council, they usually have a second or third job to pay the bills. After I graduated from Davis, I had a chance to start working in a boutique investment bank covering real estate, and they had a PE side of the house as well. Came to find out that I might enjoy a different sector of work more. So instead of the pure finance side, covering more the startup and venture capital side. And then from there, I went to a startup that was covering medtech. They were doing point of care blood cell analysis, which had both a medical use case, but also a defense use case. So it was like a real pure play dual use tech company. And then that led me to pursuing a fellowship through the Air Force through a company called Shift. I did the DVP program, Defense Ventures Fellowship, and had a chance to work alongside an amazing guy, Chris O'Connor, who was a former partner at Harpoon Ventures, who went on to become a partner at the NATO Innovation Fund. And then that experience combined with everything I'd done before that, I joined Plug and Play, where I covered defense innovation here.
You're active in the military as your third job, right? Your first job is in tech, your second job, in no particular political order, is the city council, but you're also an Air Force reservist, correct?
I've been in the Air Force Reserve now for over the past 6.5 years. I drill at Travis Air Force Base. Fun fact, the kindergarten I went to school at was actually at Travis Air Force Base. I like to say at times I'm like the longest serving airman because I've been there since I was 6 years old at Travis Air Force Base. I've been breathing jet fumes for maybe a little too long now. But yeah, no, I actively drill there and I cover intelligence work in my reserve capacity.
That's important just because it gives you another perspective on technology and innovation and how the military, which is a government entity, is evolving.
Yeah, 100%. Innovation over when we look at Silicon Valley and what led to the growth of it, to a large degree, it was the space race going back decades that pushed a lot of money from the federal government into Silicon Valley to then create advancements in satellite technology, rockets, semiconductors to put the chips on the missiles, on the satellites to help America win the space race. Another interesting point is how national security becomes a local matter. When you're a city like Fairfield, with Travis Air Force Base being within your city bounds, national security isn't this like 1,000 miles away concept that only you talked about in DC. It's really what helps build the culture of Fairfield when you have so many folks who serve the country living in your city, your kids attend your schools. That does really create a unique experience to grow up in. And not only do we talk about the issues that affect the city being housing, jobs, but also, well, what can Fairfield do to help Travis ensure that they can go do what they need to do? And if that has to do with ensuring that access to the base is safe when there are, for example, protests going on, that those are happening, protecting everybody involved, the protesters, protecting the base, and ensuring it's a safe environment to let people express themselves, but really ensuring that you have strong collaboration between the civilian side at Fairfield, at the city of Fairfield, with law enforcement, for example, and then collaborating with the base and working on these federal projects together makes for a really unique experience, especially for someone like me, because my council district actually encompasses the base. Not only is that part of the
Mm.
Air Force Reserve hat, but it's also part of my city council hat. And then at Plug and Play, I cover defense, covering this space from a different perspective, but same topic.
Yeah, and there's an economic development angle to the military base as well. And that's something that we often look at, how much it's impacting the GDP of Solano County and the city of Fairfield, the importance of the number of jobs, not just on base, but logistical and support. And it often comes up that there could be more around that as a hub for economic activity and supporting the base with other logistical companies. That does bring an interesting perspective. I also just want to dive in on the other famous people who lost big elections. Bill Clinton lost. George W. Bush, before he was governor, lost the congressional seat, and Abraham Lincoln lost 8 different times running for office. And we think of him as one of the greatest presidents. I think perseverance, building relationships, and you continue to learn from that.
Yeah, on the Lincoln front, this past year, I read a book called, it was recommended to me by a friend, Team of Rivals, which talks about how Lincoln went about building his cabinet right before the Civil War, leading up to the Civil War, and how his administrations navigated that time period. Fascinating book. And I think if we built administrations more like how he built his cabinet, then we'd see a much better government at times, both at the state level, national level. It's definitely a principle that you can apply anywhere. Have you had a chance to read that book by any chance?
No, but I'm looking at Team of Rivals. You type in
Yeah.
team and it comes up. And I like it's by Doris Curtin Goodwins, who is a well-known author of presidential historian and everything else. But wow, the audio version is 42 hours.
I was about to say, I will admit, I read parts of it, but I this is the entire thing.
Thanks.
I
I can
drive
edit that.
I drive quite a bit, so it took me many hours. Yeah, as you mentioned, 40 hours of listening, which took a few months to get through.
Yeah, that's a big one. I might not be able to finish in time for the library app, but maybe I'll pick that up elsewhere.
Just to go back, as you
Yeah.
said, one of the largest impacts on the Solano County GDP is Travis Air Force Base. One of the unique things about Solano County is our largest employers is actually the public sector. You're talking about entities like the base, Travis Air Force Base, some of the prisons, the prison in Vacaville, huge employer, the school districts, obviously, and then the hospital. I think that's a great way to ensure you have a strong base of an economy. But when you're looking at what are you going to do to grow sustainably over the next 5, 10, 15 years, you might not want any of these organizations to grow that much. So you need at some point for those who are contributing to the economy of Solano County to be at some point the private industry to help create those jobs locally that can then scale into companies that can hire 50, 500, maybe 1,000 down the road, and then continue to grow from there. And I think we're at the beginning stages of being able to build those industries. I often like to say, you look at the core between San Francisco and Sacramento. One of the things I love about Fairfield is that we're a dead center. We are nearly 40 miles from Sacramento and 40 miles from San Francisco. We are the middle of California. And I think we can do a better job at playing up to that. And if you're looking at like innovation, for example, in defense, Fairfield's proximity to Travis Air Force Base makes a lot of sense to support that industry because you're so close to the warfighter in that sense. And Travis's impact is global. They're doing missions everywhere, supporting humanitarian stuff, war defense stuff. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do more in that space and kind of help people along the way.
Let's hit on that before we dive into the technology. Travis is a leading logistical support for the Asian market, the Middle Eastern market, huge. But from an economic development standpoint, a lot of the companies that supplied Travis with that logistical support are not in the greater Fairfield, Solano area. What are some things that can be done to improve that and attract some of those companies to have facilities here?
I think as quite well. Doing business with the government is not the easiest, might be the most hardest customer to work with, and for good reason. You want to make sure that the folks you're working with are doing good work and with great background and stuff. There is a lot of compliance work that has to go into the back end, but I think we all understand that. One of the things I'm excited about that is going to help businesses to do work with not with Travis Air Force Base specifically has been they've been hosting these events called industry days for the past couple of years, and they've done a really good job at bringing in outside companies and vendors to come inside the wire, so to speak, to be able to meet folks at the base and learn about how to do business with the base. And these are more non-traditional vendors who otherwise would not have the ability to learn how to do that because the event takes place on Travis Air Force Base. Imagine getting a few hundred people cleared as guests to come on and hosting this really good public-private event. Things like that are going to help when you're seeing how do you get folks earlier to come in and lean in and support what the mission is and what they're doing.
I want to come back to the topic right now. There's a change in technology right now with the advancement of AI. There's a lot of fear over this balance of protecting workers' jobs who work for local government, but also innovating and embracing new technologies. Government, especially local government, tends to be slow at adopting new technology. They tend to safeguard. There's an old adage in government procurement around technology that if I buy from IBM, I won't lose my job, so I'm going to do that. And that held true until about 2010, when the CIA actually awarded a huge contract to the Amazon World Services, the cloud, over Microsoft and IBM. And that was the first time government really started to branch out and do other things. But what should government know about this change that's happening with AI? And talk about that lens of resistance to change and being cautious as part of that.
I'm going to push back a little bit because I have a personal.
Yeah.
While I was on the school board at Travis Unified, we actually were able to be one of the first school districts to pilot a technology with a startup to help with education. The company was basically operating in the space between helping with mentorship, basically between students and those in college and helping them along the college application process. We were the first school district to sign a formal pilot with the company, and it did really well. And that was basically done because the board was willing to lean in on it. The superintendent was very optimistic about it. As we see younger folks enter government who've grown up with technology more, I think you'll see government overall begin to move faster on it. For example, me being someone obviously on the younger side in government does help push some of this stuff a little earlier and for folks to think about it more. That's why it's really important to, at the core of it, to just have a seat at the table to bring that perspective. That was one success story I wanted to share because that was a great example of being able to move fast. But
Yeah, and that's important. And that's why you're the expert on this topic today.
an interesting use case, for example, with AI in this instance, I think is going to be how do you help communicate what a city is doing with people? A government does so much across a dozen different industries or verticals, or these aren't the right words to use, different areas of responsibility that a city covers. And one of the biggest gaps usually is it's hard to communicate that to the people, to the citizens we represent, just because everybody out there has their life to live, their jobs to do, their families to take care of. And the last thing you want to do is spend 5 hours on the council meeting, but then you also have the planning commission meeting, you have the school board meeting, then you have the special committee meeting, and every organization might have a special meeting. I thought I once did a search. I think there's 60 different agencies and boards in Solano County alone. And one of the use cases and the problems I would love to see this stuff solve is how do you condense all this information to be digestible So you can have some sort of agent that you can just talk to be like, what is my city doing? And get that answered in a few minutes. We're not quite there yet. That would require so many different partnerships and plugins and stuff to be able to pull all this information. It'd be a monumental effort, probably. And the problem, I think, generally sometimes becomes who pays for this? Because the problem might sound great and the solution is amazing, but then the market for it, when it comes to who's going to pay for this information, it gets really tricky because you're solving a problem that, while is important, might be really hard to quantify. Then it becomes, is this more of a nonprofit focus versus a for-profit focus? Because solving problems in this space might not make the most business sense per se, because you can't, and you probably shouldn't be charging the kind of margins you would selling some typical software to a business. But like, it's things like that I think about often because, for example, in the city of Fairfield, we're working on a project. It's a permanent supportive housing project. It was just hard to get information out in time at the pace and at the speed people want. I think we need some sort of solution to help with that. It has to be more than just we talk about at a council meeting, because that doesn't get out to enough eyes. Social media has been one, but even then, you're maybe engaging with 10% of the whole population that are going to engage with that content. And when you're talking about a city of 100,000 plus people, over 30, 40,000 homes, mail is an option. It's very expensive. I don't have a great solution for it per se, but I know there is going to be something at the intersection of in this GovTech space between constituent relationship management. I've seen a couple companies come and go in the space, and I think the problem does become the business model behind it and how you think through that, because that's going to be really important. I think it's a wicked hard problem.
It's right, finding the balance of who pays and how. And you're right, not everybody is on X looking for an all capitalized statement from your city manager on something. Let's talk about time to review things, right? Government, we talked about, it tends to be careful, particularly with their procurement process. You're seeing defense, though, a lot of shifts to speed up that procurement process and review. With technology changing so rapidly, how can cities carefully look at more rapidly procuring and piloting new technology?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, like the general consensus when it comes to innovation in like Silicon Valley is move fast and break things. Not necessarily the approach you want to take in defense, let alone at local government, where that's just not the culture usually. I think one, if that is the course a city, for example, wants to take, or an organization, you have to some degree, incentivize that sort of behavior. One of the problems, for example, historically on the government contracting side is the incentive for a contracting professional, acquisition professional to go out of the way to do something different at times might not be that high, let alone if something goes wrong, the fear, because maybe on paper is if something goes wrong, you might end up in a legal hearing potentially and end up down the road in prison, prevents a lot of folks from maybe wanting to take risks on a new thing, even if it's good. Yeah, but I will admit that the reason we have all of these rules to begin with is historically because folks have gotten a little too creative historically on acquisitions and buying stuff for the government, that you need to have this in place. 100%. That is, you need that for sure. I think from the city perspective, when it comes to leaning in on newer technologies, for example, that might be coming from a new vendor that is cheaper, is just the realities of city budgets right now across California. But I'll just use my city, for example, where we have a small structural deficit. I know some of the other cities in Solano County do as well. And I'm going to assume here that many other cities in California are facing that same challenge. Overall, you're building to a degree more, folks are living longer, costs are going up like everything else. And at times expenditures are outpacing revenue when you're having to continue participating and supporting, obviously for a good reason, your long-term obligations and pensions and stuff like that for the retirement. It does make for a challenging fiscal landscape. When you're looking at the solutions for operating a city, you're going to have to start looking at these newer companies that are building, because it'll just be cheaper and that'll just help the dollars stretch more. And I think we're getting close to that now, of that need becoming higher.
Along those lines, I have several clients in the GovTech space, and When I talk to cities, they're like, wait, we don't want that to replace any jobs. We don't want any problems with our unions. This isn't criticism of the unions. That's just a political line that people give me. And I said, but the goal is that we're saving them, every person, if we save them an hour to 2, 3 hours a day, they should be able to utilize that time to do more and replace future hires or retirees, or a lot of cities just have vacancies they can't fill. How should cities look in a new way around that issue, that it's not about replacing people like Workday or Salesforce who just fired people with AI? It's just about shifting what they do.
I think you said it well. The goal is not, government is inherently about people. Politics is about people. Like that is always going to be a part of it. And I think we are a long time away from where we're going to be like, I want a machine to be the judge or something like that. I think we're far away from that. Not far from it becoming a technical capability or possibility, but far from a society or a culture that we're like, that's what we want to listen to, or we all agree as a collective that is the decision making body we're going to adhere to. We are far from that, I think. I think many folks can probably attest to the fact that a lot of their time when they're working, it's you're not actually getting your work done. You're just trying to get through your emails or something like that. Like the amount of time you spend on like the core work of getting something done and delivering on something might be a minority of your time. A majority of it oftentimes gets taken up by just a meeting, maybe where you're not contributing anything in, but you're added to the calendar and this and that. I think a great area for us to look at is really going to be, as you said, like how do you augment someone to be able to get more done in less time? And there have been so many companies out there that are building specific AI assistants to support that. I don't think we've seen a clear winner quite yet, but if you look at the stack here, like we have the data centers that have come on, the foundation models are being built, the application layer is getting better, and now we're moving on to the agent side. And that's where we're going to start seeing, I think, a lot more innovation when it comes to AI agents to support government, for example. We're just beginning to approach that. So there's not a lot of great success stories to mention. But there was a company that was doing some work with the mayor's office of Denver that had built an AI assistant essentially to help with facilitating scheduling and emails and all that kind of stuff. We're seeing more and more of that. But the goal is just to give people back their time, man. And I think we don't have a great product to do that yet because there's so many folks competing right now in the space to enable that to happen. But the need for it is massive. It's a multi-billion-dollar problem of getting something to run in the background to support you. And we're seeing that on the commercial side. And we're already starting to see it. For example, I think AI Copilot, Microsoft Copilot launched with our city, for example. We have a few licenses for it. It's beginning to happen. And as you said, it's not about replacing really. It's really about augmenting to help people.
Give a couple of examples that city staff, council people who are listening should consider looking at, just the use cases, not necessarily companies, where they could start incorporating some of this to save that time and hopefully money with that.
One example that stuck with me was seeing how San Francisco PD began to use drones for law enforcement. And the goal was never to replace police officers for law enforcement. It was how do you augment a police officer's job to help them do it better? As you might recall, like post-COVID, San Francisco saw a massive increase in car break-ins. We all saw it. I think we all know someone who's had their car broken into in the past few years in San Francisco. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the general consensus is that those numbers have gone down significantly. And in part, you've seen San Francisco PD using drones to track the cars that get broken into, that get driven away. And it makes for a safer environment overall because you're not having to have police officers speed through intersections to go catch this car because they now can see from a 30,000 foot view, not literally 30,000 feet, but from a bird's eye view, where's that car headed? We'll go send an officer to intercept them and they can travel at a reasonable, safe speed. You have come full circle on that crime engagement. And you basically enable the officer to conduct that mission set in a safer way. I think that's a great use case. And it does bring up a concern, I will admit, of the argument behind like a surveillance state kind of system. I think the privacy side of this is going to be a really important discussion of how do you ensure you're not unreasonably putting cameras on people, reporting people, and all that kind of stuff. That is a well-needed debate to have. And I think organizations like City Council, Board of Supervisors, and California State Assembly, the State Senate, and stuff like that will have those discussions as they come up in time. But that's one great example, I think, on the law enforcement side. And I bring that up because as we're tracking, like the majority of city spend is on law enforcement. That is nearly half, if not, well, usually over half of the city budget. If you can reduce the amount of resources it takes for law enforcement to conduct its business, you'll then begin to open up dollars to go toward other buckets that the city spends on. For example, Parks and Rec, for example. It's usually sometimes the earliest place to cut because it impacts maybe the least amount of people directly, and you can reallocate money. And it's unfortunate. If there's ways to save money from the biggest bucket and reallocate in a responsible manner, I think that'll make for a better city operational mission set overall. But yeah, that's one that comes to mind off the top of my head.
I think that's good. And I have a couple of public safety clients, one that's geared towards helping law enforcement write their police reports. And
that was another one that came to mind. Yeah.
it's geared towards, let's say, police, based on the level of arrest, have to spend, I like simple math, 4 hours writing reports and doing paperwork. My example is no police officer went to the academy to do paperwork. We call those people accountants. But if we could reduce that by taking their body camera footage and an audio statement while the officer is driving back to their precinct from central booking or something like that. And they still have to spend time on the report. They still have to read it. They still have to input their own thoughts and proofread everything. But that could still save 3 out of 4 hours on the reports and make use of time more efficiently. The goal there, I say, isn't about cutting hours for overtime and the officers that like getting overtime. Get them back on the streets, get them back in the community, meeting with people, because that will reduce your crime. And then it'll continue in a cycle. And I have other examples in law enforcement like that. I also am talking with a communications company that can help save employees hours of time by like setting up those FAQs. How do you, not have to take every phone call in or email in and respond? And how do you track somebody calling about a pothole problem? Those are common questions city council people get. When you get that and you get it via text message, how do you send it over to staff? How do you track that staff ever gets back to that person and says, yes, we are on our pothole list? If AI can help streamline and manage that communication process, that seems like an improvement to me that makes the workers that are there more efficient in all of those cases.
One thing that the city of Fairfield has done is we launched a chatbot on our city website called Archie, which is powered by a company called CityBot. And it's a way for people to ask their kind of more straightforward questions that they want a quick answer to. Leveraging this AI-enabled assistant on our website, that saves a little bit of time. It's a start because I think there's a lot more we can do in that space. But that's one thing that we've done to begin implementing some of this stuff. I'm looking forward to the future of this space because folks in general are usually not, broadly speaking, are not like in love or very happy with their government. But I think over time, as some of this stuff just becomes more utilized and more clear and more transparent, it'll make engaging with government easier because it's definitely hard. The amount of layers you have to it. And in the beginning stages, I think of seeing a strong interest from the commercial side of engaging with GovTech. I know you had Rachel Stern on from GovTech Ventures. She did work in the space. You've seen American Dynamism from A16Z involved in the GovTech public safety space. One of the benefits of the increase in interest of defense tech has been not only looking at defense tech only, but looking at defense tech as a sect of government innovation broadly. And that's been, I think, a net benefit of the space because historically, no one really looked at GovTech as a hot area. But with the increase of interest in defense venture, that's gotten folks to start thinking about defense, but then also public safety. And from public safety, you started engaging at the city level. And then all of a sudden, you're like, wait, there are cities with billion-dollar budgets. And all of a sudden, you're like, this isn't really a small market. This is a massive market. But the go-to-market strategy is not clear, per se, because it is quite antiquated overall. It'll just take a lot more time for people to get used to breaking in and doing business with, for example, city, municipal, county governments. But it'll help a lot once we can do more of it.
Let's look at it from a company perspective. Let's put the big companies, the Googles, the Microsofts aside right now. If you're a startup early stage or even an A round company with 25 employees, how do you break into the GovTech market? How do you meet people? Let's first start with that. And then second, let's look at like, how do you convince government to pilot something that's not been done before?
On the engagement front, this might sound a little too simplistic, but I have found if you call, people usually pick up the phone. And government, I think to a degree, has to respond to every phone call they get. Sometimes a as simple as a call to the city manager's office goes a long way. Obviously, a warm intro is probably the best way to get anything done, but I would say don't downplay the impact a cold call can make. I went to DC recently, and at one point we did make a couple of cold calls and then set up some meetings at the Hill. It does work. Now, that's not the best strategy per se. It is one. The other one would be when it comes to engaging on the conference front. When you're looking at, for example, educational institutions, you have CSBA in California, the California School Board Association. They host a couple conferences per year. You'll have hundreds of school board members from around the state attending that. Now, they have their own national version of that association as well. Becoming a small sponsor for these events usually goes a long way in meeting many people all at once. And then on the city government perspective, it's probably one of the best organizations in California when it comes to municipal politics and government, the League of California Cities. They are a powerhouse when it comes to California government. And you have usually a couple of council members from each city in California attending that conference. That's a great time to the company, for example, doesn't even have to buy a ticket to attend per se. I'm sure Cal cities would love for them to, but just be in Long Beach at that time and then reach out to people, ask to grab coffee. And I think if you give people a chance, they'll meet you halfway. And people do, I know for other conferences, people do that all the time. Like they'll be in San Francisco doing JPM, not to go to JPM, just to be in SF at that time. Or, for example, in Florida for Soft Week. You might not attend Soft Week per se, but they'll be in Florida at that moment in time in Tampa, then have the meetings. Just proximity matters. And being the right place at the right time matters a lot. And I think tracking some of those conferences can go a long way in building those relationships organically to then break in and sell into that space.
I have been known to do that at the California League of Cities, where I will sit in the lobby of the convention center or hotel lobby, which is the main hotel they take up several for that conference. We'll just be there to talk at the bar. I have a plan and I reach out to people and I know people and they always bring a friend, but I will do that as a way to start those conversations and build that relationship. I recommend that. It's also about building relationships. Go to people you trust, utilizing parties that are like myself, connected and friends with people, because they don't want a transactional thing. They want to know that this is government. Like you said, they represent people. That's a relationship game for them. The other part of that is, how do you get a city to pilot something that's new and innovative? Here's the concept. Here's the idea. This is how we could prove to you how the technology works, but it's never been done, or it's only been done in Tacoma, Washington, or in El Paso, Texas. How do we bring that to larger scale for our cities both the city to adopt it, but how do the companies get in and get that first set of data and approve this crazy idea could work?
Oh, assuming they don't have anything already happening, how do you break in from zero?
Hey, we did a pilot project as part of our degree at Stanford or Berkeley. Here's what we're testing. Here's where we believe it'll work.
A couple of things come to mind. One is, even though all cities in America tend to have the same core responsibilities, public safety, housing, permits, whatever, they'll each have their own twist to it. What I mean by that, they'll give priority to different things. The same things Fairfield cares about might not be what Beverly Hills cares about. There might be different priorities. Even though we're doing the same core job as a city, what you focus on, what you spend a majority of your time on, or what are your goals are going to be a little different. Where I'm going with that is usually each council is going to put out a list of council priorities. It might be 5 or 6 things, and then there'll be a larger document after that go into specific goals that they want to get done. If you can figure out which one you fall into, which bucket you fall into, That'll go a long way because the city manager and his team or their team, their goal is to go after those council objectives that in 1 year, when they go back to the table and say, did we get any of these done? The city wants to be able to put a good showing forward. And that helps the city look good. It helps with the city manager's evaluation. And when it comes up and when they're dealing with renewal possibly and stuff, the city manager needs to be able to point to getting these council objectives done. I think one would definitely be looking at whatever city someone's thinking about. What is that council's priorities? What are their objectives and goals? And it'll usually, it should be pretty clearly identified somewhere on the website that these are what they're focused on. That is one of the first things that comes to mind. The other one would be look, I would say do some homework on the bios of your council members. For example, if we're dealing with city government, and see if there's anyone who has a background in the space you're looking at. I think an intro from a council member to staff goes a long way in just getting visibility. You're not really getting priority on winning a contract because we're not involved in that per se until the very, very end process. But when it comes to just taking a look at something, hey, could this help the city? If a council member is willing to take a call with somebody and then say, you know what, let's see if this can help our city, that'll go a long way. And then I think engaging with folks on councils and stuff, any kind of community event, they'll usually be around. I would say folks in that seat, I would like to think, tend to be fairly accessible people.
That's a good point, because if you have a transportation technology issue that can solve parking or reduce left-hand turns in one intersection that's causing a lot of accidents, there's usually a council member that prioritizes transportation within a city, right? They sit on the regional transit authorities, the bus authorities, representing the city. They take more of an interest in it. And that would be the appropriate person to start having the conversation with, where the staff director of that space might be like, I don't have a budget for new technology. I'm not interested. But it could be looked at differently. Or it's finding that balance between approaching the right council person who prioritizes that topic or going to staff.
There's a bit of just education or just maybe cross teaching that has to go on, because generally speaking, the companies that have operated in municipal business have been industry kind of giants in a way, and they are well established, for example. There is a bit of just maybe contracting education that has to go back and forth between the startup, who might be a 3-person team that doesn't have a legal, HR, compliance team just ready to go. And for the city to be willing to just explain and walk them through that process sometimes. But it's also contingent upon, for example, the small business in this case, for them to be able to do the homework and be able to spend the money to get the compliance done, to become a vendor to the government. Because this is such a newer thing that's going on now, as we're seeing what people build in the space.
That's really interesting, because there's another side to that. The pressure that some of these GovTech startups, particularly those taking early stage seed money or venture funds, they might have a great product and it solves that need, some of that police tech we were talking about. But what they don't realize is, just because you're even giving that to a city as a free pilot program, you can't offer it to them on September 10th and expect to close a deal by September 30th, because that's unrealistic. Government works in a process and a timeline. What are your thoughts around that, both from how can government work more efficiently, but also what do you want the startups in GovTech to know about that timeline?
One thing, and this is a perspective, I think my views might evolve on over time, but at least for now, for conversational sake, might be trying to avoid signing long year engagement contracts with companies. It leaves very little room for a city, for example, to try new things, because if you're locked into one service provider on a 10-year contract or one technology vendor for a 10-year contract, you will not have any ability to try new things. I think this is much more of a strategic shift for a city if they want to go down that path of, you know what, we love your thing right now. We'll do a 2-year engagement or 3-year engagement. And after that, we'll see what we can do. I think it takes a lot of level acceptability of not pain per se. What's the right word? If you're dealing with newer companies in the market, like just the growth of a company, and like the product might change over time. So you can't do
Yeah.
everything, but if you're willing to kind of lean in and be on the front end of innovation in the space, I'm rambling now. Let me go back to the point being not signing multi-year engagements, because I've seen that happen even in our own city where we're dealing with a vendor and it's, oh, I'd love to try something else. Like, oh, we can because we have this for the next 8 years. And I'm like,
And it's exclusive, and the world is changing so quick. And I would also caution those particularly investing in or those startup founders. This is not a business to consumer product. To our point is government has a whole lot of process in place and there's reasons for it. They are trying to innovate a little faster, but at the same time, you cannot expect 60, 90-day, even 6 months is a very fast timeline in government to look and embrace and close a deal. And so I would just be cautious to know that look at where you are and making progress in your sales, but 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months, see if you're advancing it.
absolutely.
What's a problem in government that you would love a technology solution to solve?
On the public sector side, like I serve on a council. I have other colleagues who are on different councils. I have colleagues that are on different boards and stuff. And one thing I'm never really aware of, I am aware because I talk to them at events and stuff, but it's hard to track in a quick way what everybody else is doing, because there's quite a bit of duplication of effort at times. We might be doing a transportation project that somebody else is too, or something else. Even though you do have these regional boards that exist, it's usually just one person sitting on it, and information doesn't flow
Right.
around in an efficient manner. Like for me, I would love if there was a way for me to engage with a product that I can query questions against. Oh, what if there was a centralized system of decision making happening across a county, for example?
Hmm.
It was like a platform where you can just see, and it summarizes for you. This is the three big things Fairfield did that week at Vacaville, the county, Dixon, Rio Vista, Sassoon. But then not only the councils, the boards, the commissions, the committees, just one all-encompassing platform for all that in a dashboard view would be super helpful, because for me to figure out what we should do maybe as a future in the city of Fairfield, it would be helpful for me to be able to figure out quickly what are the other cities, counties in the region doing. And that would not be a easy thing to do when you start looking at 5 or 10 cities at once, because you'd have to go into each city's minutes individually or something like that,
Yeah.
and different newspapers. This has been an area I've been thinking a lot about, is how to build this knowledge base that updates 24/7 and pulls information in. You create the Bloomberg terminal, a Bloomberg terminal like system for local government. That's one. Yeah, that'd be a big one for me. Man, this has been an absolute pleasure. It's great to see you again, and I hope to catch up with you soon. And yeah,
Thanks. I appreciate it. Manveer Sandhu, councilman from the city of Fairfield and tech executive. Thank you for joining me today.
thanks, Jared.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.